Networking and marketing made simple is for you, the business owner who has a product, a service, or a message that you believe in. My name is Scott Aaron, and each week we'll take a behind-the-scenes look into the real-world marketing and networking tactics and strategies for getting what you have in front of you to a lot more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and now let's get started. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Networking and Marketing Made Simple. Super excited for today's episode for a number of reasons. I've been getting such great feedback recently from all of the listeners as far as how much they love the interviews. They love hearing the stories of other people and the successes that they're having and how they've done it. And obviously that entrepreneurship and business is not a straight line. And the vulnerability, the transparency, all the things that go into being the entrepreneurs that we are. And why I'm also excited is that I have Jevon Wooden with me today. He specializes in empathetic leadership, but also just being authentic and real. And that goes such a long way, not just in business, but in life. And we always talk about, every single day that we wake up, we're leaving our legacy as it stands. We don't have to wait until we're gone for our legacy to be felt. We can leave it right now and every single day that we're given. So with all that being said, Jevon, welcome to today's episode.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. I'm excited to be here, man.
Well, grateful to have you. And obviously, I had the honor and privilege of going on Jevon's podcast a few weeks back. And as podcasters always do, we're happy to return the favor to make sure that our audiences are getting to know one another. So, Jevon, before we get into the empathetic leadership and obviously being very open, transparent, all the things that you are known for, let's go back before we go forward. So, if you could press rewind on the tape of your life and or business and press stop at what you would consider a pivotal moment, in your life, in your career, that really played the catalyst for everything that you have going on today, what was that moment for you?
Man, I would go back to when I was 17. And at 17 years old, I grew up in Rochester, New York. And at 17 years old, I was facing 7 years in prison. And I was facing that time. What I realized after I looked back at it and had the opportunity to perform that introspection and assess the situation was, I realized that I was going about life all wrong. And I was looking at life all wrong. I looked at myself as valueless because I didn't have any money. And I didn't realize that the true value was empathy, was my heart, was my intellect, was the way I could perceive and connect with people, was the way that I can pour into them and get them feeling that they were something more than what they felt they were. So, of course, I didn't realize that then because I was sitting in that cell, but I was given a second chance. Instead of doing those 7 years, I was put on probation and I was given the opportunity to finish high school and go to the military. And that really transformed the entire trajectory of my life, Scott. I was able to then apply those lessons and that second chance to say, you know what, I'm going to do something with myself. I'm not going to be a product of my environment. I'm going to be a product of my effort. And hence, here I am on this podcast. And everything I do now is not so much tied to a specific outcome, but giving the best that I can and being real in everything that I do.
What arm of well, thank you for sharing all that first. What arm of the military were you in?
Army.
Awesome. So, I have military in my family. My grandfather served in World War II. My uncle, my two cousins, both did a couple stints in Iraq. My brother-in-law did a stint in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that, that kind of runs deep in a lot of families, especially in the US. That time that you spent in the Army, obviously there's a lot of lessons that are taught, respect, discipline, routine, structure. If you could pinpoint one of the many lessons that you learned in the military that allowed you to kind of cross over into the consulting side of things and everything that you're doing now? What was that big lesson that you learned in being in the military that has helped you flourish in business today?
Yeah, I mean that, and thank you to your family for their service. That is a long lineage of service for sure. Um, the big lesson that I learned in the military was you don't do it alone. It was really that collaboration piece because I hadn't seen that before. What I was actually taught the opposite, that you get it on your own, that you have to, especially as a man, you have to figure it out. But in the military, everything we do is cooperation. Whether you like the person or not, you have to figure it out together because literally the mission depends on it, but your life can depend on it in some of these cases.
I always talk about the fact that and I obviously I use this quote. It's crazy. An army of two is twice as strong as an army of one, and collaboration runs deep with me as well. There's a book I read very early on called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. This book was written in 1910. I still read it at least once a year. And if you read it, it's spoken in the tongue of, obviously 1910s. So there's a lot of thous and arts and all those, but you can read
Right.
between the lines, so to speak. And, one of the big principles that Wallace talks about in this book is, instead of living in a world of competition and comparison, live in a world of creation and collaboration. And I wish more people would latch on to that sentiment, because there's a lot of people, especially in entrepreneurship and coaching and consulting, we think that we have to go it alone, right? We gotta put those blinders on. We got to keep our nose to the ground. Do not come up for air whatsoever. We wear that grinded out each and every day badge of honor like we're supposed to, when in all reality, it's about working smarter and not harder. So when
Right.
you got out of the Army, obviously you then started your professional career. What would you say was the most challenging aspect of, still being a coaching consultant, but that learning curve, almost like being on your own now? You spent your time in the Army, you were a part of a unit, you were a part of a daily collaboration, right? Everything you did was, with the group, with the people that you were around each and every day. And then when you're kind of, thrown into entrepreneurship as a coach and consultant, your best friends sometimes are the four walls that are around you in the office that you're in. That's all you got, or doing podcasts like this. So what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome of going from being in a collaborative environment every single day to now being on your own?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Scott. I believe that the biggest hurdle for all of that was finding out how I can re-experience that collaboration, right? You mentioned podcasting, how I can develop that network, because I knew that I had a lot of things, a lot of gaps that I needed to fill, and you can't fill those if you don't seek the knowledge and information or the people. So I just needed to find out the spaces I needed to be in. And to do that, I asked a lot of people a lot of questions. I was willing to pay and get into different masterminds and groups, but I really wanted to just recreate that with the right people. So that's how I did it. And that was the hardest part, was finding those people that weren't just about money or weren't just in it for themselves, the people that were actually going to pour into me the way that I was willing to pour into them, and those people that were willing to share that knowledge and didn't have that fixed mindset to say, oh, I need to hoard this information, right? They had that growth mindset, and they realized exactly what that book talked about, that we can all have a piece of success, right? If we help one another, that we can actually reach success exponentially faster than if we tried to go at it alone.
Yeah, it's the law of reciprocation, right? You
Yes.
got to scratch each other's backs. I could not agree with any of those statements more. It's something that Nancy and I talk about often, is the difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, right? You can't do things alone, and getting yourself into a room where everybody has that same, that same passion, that same drive, that they want to be better, they want to do better. and they want to do it together, right? They want to link arms and collaborate, and help one another, because when one person wins, everybody wins. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is that they're not collaborating enough. You know, I part of my daily operation is collaborating, whether it's doing a podcast interview or just hopping on a get to know you call. You have to create as many business allies as possible. You know, Andy
Right.
Crestodina, who was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, you know, he's Inc. 5000 like 3 times. He said, if you're not making friends in business, you're not in business at all. And I could not agree with that statement more, because, you know, it's not all about the money. The money shows up when the impact is felt. That's really what it comes down to. And I really feel I wish more people would latch onto that and understand that, you know, you don't have to go it alone. You know, linking arms with the right people that have that growth mindset is so impactful. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I know at a certain point, every single one of us goes through that internal battle of that fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And I remember, you know, with me, I never had what I would call like a negative fixed mindset, but I did not have a growth mindset until
Right.
about 10 or 11 years ago, when I started doing personal development. I started reading books. I started hiring coaches. I joined masterminds like you. And then it becomes almost like an addiction. Like you want more, you know, because you know how much of the needle can be moved forward in a short amount of time when you switch on that mindset. So for you, what were the biggest changes that you personally had to make from going from that fixed mindset to that growth mindset, and obviously where it landed you today?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things that I had to work on was trust, truly trusting, right? To say, okay, this person, what's their angle? Because even in the military, that's what I was thinking. I knew that we had a common goal in the military, so we had to get it done regardless. But in business, you may not, right? So I had to find out a way to ensure that our values, that whoever I worked with had shared values, that we had a common goal, or at least something that would make sure we all had a dog in the fight. And then I also had to work on the ability to communicate and convey exactly what I was looking to get out of it, not from a selfish perspective, but to ensure that I wasn't just there wasting time, because we don't have an infinite amount, right? That's the resource that's finite. We can't get it back. So I had to make sure that I was not just doing things because it looked good or it sounded good or someone told me it was amazing, but because I knew that I could implement what I was going to get out of it. And then also that I was going to create those relationships you were talking about, because I don't like transaction. I don't like to just work with someone one time. I want to make sure that I'm in a group where I can continue to build with these folks. I can continue to check in, even if it's 6 months later, to say, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee if they're local, or hey, let's hop on that call to catch up. Right. And that's what was the difficult parts for me, was those two things, building that trust, and then also the ability to say, you know what, I don't want to just say like this is good for now. I want it to be good for longevity.
What was it about leadership coaching and consulting that lit you up, in the sense that you felt that this was the avenue that you wanted to go down? This is how I wanted to help people, and this is what I'm going to dedicate my business to.
Yeah, well, the first and foremost, a lot of people, I look at leadership in a sort of different way, right? We all have agency over our lives. A lot of people don't realize that, right? And then those who are in a leadership position, they don't necessarily know what being a leader is, right? A lot of people are good managers, but not necessarily good leaders. And I saw that in the military time and time and time and time again. So I wanted to kind of change that dynamic and then give that information and insight so people could lead using empathy, and they could lead with authenticity. They didn't have to become something they weren't, right? And that they can identify using their strengths versus trying to hone to weaknesses that really weren't their cup of tea, right? So that's what made me want to focus on leadership, because there's so many things that are not said, right? People focus on what's said, but there are so many things that are not said in the leadership space. So I wanted to really bring that conversation to the forefront. I just did a speech, a talk on the silence within. And it talked about how now as leaders, we really have to focus on the whole person, right? It's no longer just about that job or filling the billet. It's more so about getting to know who that person is outside of what the task they're doing, right? So I wanted to have those types of conversations. Mental health is very prevalent. How do we talk about that? How do we make a change to that as a leader, right? So those types of things is what I really focus on. And now that I have a platform, I love bringing those taboo conversations and making them normal.
So obviously there's different types of leadership, and what you focus on is empathetic leadership. And
yes.
So every coach consultant that is a leadership coach or leadership consultant, focuses on specific niches within that market. So how did you land on empathetic leadership? And if someone listening to the podcast isn't all too familiar with what empathetic leadership is, how would you best describe it?
Yeah, so I describe empathetic leadership as putting yourself in that other person's shoes. So, for instance, if someone asks for PTO, not asking them why, not wondering what the heck, how am I going to get this stuff done? Taking yourself out of it, not making it personal, and saying, okay, let me see from a human side of things, right? Let me connect from a human perspective, and that's what empathetic leadership is to me. It's removing everything that needs to be done, all the deadlines and all the other stuff, and saying, okay, I know I have to get that done, but how can I make sure that this person, A, wants to be here, wants to get those things done, 3, has the resources to get it done, and 4, feels supported enough to say when they don't have what they need or when something's wrong, right? So those are the things that I look for, and that's what empathetic leadership is. It's about making sure that it's not just about me and what I need to get done, but making sure I'm looking at the people that I have, and supporting them in the right ways so I can have lower employee turnover, 1, higher employee morale. And then when you have those things, you're also getting things done at a faster clip, right? That's one of the things that we found in the military. And that's something that I carried over. And that's why I really wanted to focus on this empathetic leadership thing is when we focus on the person, right? The person wearing that uniform, not just the uniform and what it stood for, we were able to lower our suicide rates, 1, because that's the highest killer, the fastest killer for military. And then we were also able to ensure that our mission capabilities were enhanced because people felt better, they were able to perform better, and therefore we got more done. So that's where all that stuff comes from now.
Yeah, I think having empathy, and I always talk about something called the passenger side perspective, where it's not about you, it's about the other person. And I talk about this from, a content creation aspect. I talk about this from a coaching aspect. To feel connected to the person that you're working with or is going to be engaging in your content, you have to put yourself in that person's shoes. You have to look at them from eye level so they feel connected with and connected to. And what you described is a perfect way of not only just coaching and consulting, but really creating that connection between the coach and consultant and the client or company that they're serving. So if someone was to ask Jevon what really made his leadership coaching and consulting structure or methods different and unique from other people out there, what do you feel sets you apart the most?
There's a number of things, but one of the things I feel like sets me apart from anyone else is experiences, right? I'm able to take the number of experiences and a vast array of experiences that I've had throughout my life and provide that insight and intuition, right, to a certain experience. And then I'm also able to hear what's not being said. We talk about active listening a lot in the coaching space, but what does that really look like? And how do you convey that to the client? Right. And for me, I feel like that empathy once again comes in because empathy for me also stands for something. Right. It's, of course, I'm serving with empathy, but I'm also mindful in that space with that client. How can I best serve them in that moment? And I'm able to adjust as needed because everyone's not the same. Right. And I don't give people this stock box option thing. I'm actually tailoring my approach to that client. And I think that that's something that's missing. We're seeing a ton of courses and self-paced things, and I feel like that tailored approach is going out the window. So I like to bring that back and really apply that to everyone I work with.
Yeah, it's important to have a structure and a method of how you go about things with the people that you work with. But just like you said, that example, It's not about the uniform that person is wearing. It's the person that's actually wearing the uniform, just like the clients that we work with. Like every client, yes, they may be coming to you for the same problems, the same issues in their business or their life, but that person's life and business, each one looks different. So you have to treat it as such. You can't, it's not a straight line. It's just like entrepreneurship, right? It's not a straight line. It's a roller coaster. It's up and down. There's twists and turns. So you have to be, in a way, not so much a chameleon to business, but you have to be able to relate to those individuals. The active listening. I love that statement. I always tell people we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We have to listen more and we have to talk less. So yes, in that respect, what's the greatest piece of advice that you've ever been given in your personal and professional career that has helped elevate you to where you are today? And why was it so impactful?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, he didn't give it to me directly, but Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs talked about how time was a finite resource and how we shouldn't do life the way someone else does it, right? We should do it our way. And that was a part of, he also said, here's to the crazy ones. I like that piece of advice. I like the fact that, yes, we may have common goals and stuff, but don't get so caught up in everyone else's journey, right? Because all of our journeys are different. So do it your way and don't be afraid of those mistakes. Look at them as lessons learned and how you can apply it to your next phases, right? If we do it our way, we're more willing to reach out to other people because we're not judging ourselves and comparing ourselves. We're looking at it as a learning moment. So it just opens you up to these very beautiful serendipitous moments when we do it our way and we're not so attached to being like someone or being someone else, right? We're willing to, like you said, legacy earlier, we're willing to establish our legacy.
So as we start to wind down, before I get to my final question, if someone is interested in learning more about you, the coaching and consulting that you do, tell everyone a little bit about, how they can work with you and what's the best way they can connect with you online.
Absolutely. So you can go to brightmindconsultinggroup.com or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jevon Wooden. You'll see MBA and a light bulb. Just connect with me, shoot me a message. I will answer back. That's one of my favorite platforms to use.
Awesome. Mine too, obviously, as a lot of people know by this podcast. So all the information that Jevon shared, obviously, will be in the show notes and the description of this episode. So you're not going to have to look too far. So Jevon, final question before we sign off today. What does success truly mean to you?
Man, success to me is a word that we've mentioned a lot. It's the impact I've made on others. And that's the bottom line. When it's all said and done for me, I'm looking to have impacted millions, whether that be through my writing, whether that be through coaching, consulting, or something I've said. That's the bottom line for me, man.
Could not agree more. Success means something different, to each person. I've done well over 250 interviews at this point on the podcast, and I ask that question every single time, and it's never been about the money. The money that I always stress to people, the money is just a side effect of the impact that you're leaving behind. So Jevon, again, thank you for all your service. Thank you for everything that you're doing in the coaching and consulting space. Obviously, we need more empathetic leaders like yourself, and just grateful to connect today. And thank you again for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely appreciate you too. And as always, please reach out to us. Let us know what you loved about this episode, what your biggest takeaways are, and continue to please support the podcast wherever you're listening to this to and from. Subscribe, leave us a rating and review, or even give us some feedback of some topics that you would like to be covered, or even people that you would like to see me interview. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much again for checking out today's episode. And if you are listening through iTunes, Spotify, wherever you are, Please leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you loved, what you would like to see improved, or ideas you have for future episodes. And if you are interested in taking your business to the next level, don't hesitate to go to my website, www.scottaaron.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me, where I can learn more about you, your business, what you're struggling with, and how we can work together. And don't forget to check out my wife, Nancy, and mine, our free community on Facebook called LinkedIn Leads for Life. We would love to see you in there. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you everyone for your support. Grateful for each and every one of you.